I'm not going to go and be wishy-washy and talk to other change makers and just try and strive to make everyone in that room comfortable. Because actually, I, as a person of colour, am really uncomfortable at the fact that I and my black counterparts are so much more risk of dying in maternity care. If I am talking on things that make people feel uncomfortable and they don't like me for that, that's a them problem. But became very aware during that degree that we weren't talking much or learning much about what we call the Embrace report, and it came about in 2020 that black women 5 times more likely to die in childbearing, which I found quite significant when I asked why we weren't learning about that and what did the lecturers know about that. You're telling us how to detect jaundice in a white baby. I'm looking at the pictures on the screen and they're of white babies, and we know that the obvious signs are, yellowing of the skin. But how do I detect that in a black or brown baby? And the answer just continued to be wishy-washy. And I was asked at one point to go and find out for myself in the library, and I was like, wow, okay. There was one woman who had a stillbirth and I was handed over the care, and I remember it was judgmental. So this woman was an asylum seeking woman. There was a language barrier. There's a lot of Google Translate used, which is just a no-go. And then a position came up, the position that I'm in now, which is lead midwife for equality, diversity and inclusion. Like I can't go for that, surely, because they'll probably think that I've got such a cheek to even go for it.
Hello and welcome to the podcast Love, Life and Loss. Today we have Keelie joining us. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Would you like to introduce yourself for us, please?
Hi, no, thank you for having me. My name's Keelie Grindley. I am a NHS midwife and also a midwife for equality, diversity and inclusion. And I have my own midwifery consultancy for Black and Brown women and birthing people called Nya Birth Collective.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And you do some amazing work, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today. So would you like to tell us your story from the beginning and what that looks like to you?
Yeah, okay. So I am a mother. I've got a little boy who is nearly 9. He's 9 in April. And when he was 1 year old, I decided to go on to, I think it was called an access to higher education course for a year at college. It was access to health because I wanted to be a midwife, but I needed to do a bit more higher education to get there. So I went into midwifery quite late on. I think I was 30. Yeah. So it was that's the course I needed to do before I went on to the 3-year degree. Always wanted to be a midwife when I was a teenager, but it was one of those where, as it's a Bachelor of Science degree, I was always into the performing arts. I didn't feel like I was clever enough to go on the degree when I was 18, much to my mum's dismay. So I went down the performing arts route. So I've had a big career change, if you like. So yeah, went on to the higher education course, redid my GCSE maths, which was fun, also whilst being a single mum to my baby at the time. Did the 3-year degree, and during that time learned all things clinical, but became very aware during that degree that we weren't talking much or learning much about what we call the Embrace report, which is a report that comes out every year around kind of maternity and neonatal outcomes, and it breaks things down. And it came about in 2020 that Black women were more likely to have adverse outcomes and poor outcomes for their babies. It was 5 times more likely to die in childbearing, which I thought I was horrified by that. And I found out that myself kind of through reading and extracurricular research, but I found it quite significant when I asked why we weren't learning about that and what did the lecturers know about that. They weren't able to give me an answer. So it was from that point on, really, as a student midwife, that I was very passionate about trying to make change and contribute to improving outcomes somehow for Black and Brown women and birthing people in maternity. So that's where my passion began, really.
Okay.
You
That's
know.
amazing. Sorry to interrupt you, but that just want to point that out. That's amazing to be a student midwife and to pick that up
Mhm.
and to challenge it as well. Like not
Yeah.
many people would have the courage to do that. So I think that
Yeah.
I just wanted to mark that. That is amazing.
No, thank you. It was quite frustrating really because the questions would continue, you're telling us how to detect jaundice in a white baby. I'm looking at the pictures on the screen. I'm looking at the pictures in the textbooks, and they're of white babies. And we know that the obvious signs are, yellowing of the skin. But how do I detect that in a black or brown baby? And the answers just continued to be wishy washy. There's grey areas. There wasn't proper answers. And I was asked at one point to go and find out for myself in the library. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, I'm a student midwife and I should be being taught that. So it became very evident as a student midwife that, white was the normative standard, which has now been evidenced by the NHS Race and Health Observatory, that white is the normative standard on the midwifery degree and also learning beyond that for registered midwives. So it was frustrating, to say the least. So I qualified, I think it was 2022. And when you qualify, you have to work clinically in lots of different areas, like the postnatal ward, the labour ward, community, etc. So I did that, and we do what we call a preceptorship, where you're qualified, you have your freedom to work to your own initiative and have your own patients, but you still need to get competencies signed off. So it's a bit like a probation period. So I completed that in 6 months, which was great. And then, yeah, got all of the freedom. Still newly qualified, but you kind of just move up a band and that's it now, you're off your probation period. Worked for a bit longer in that position, and then a position came up, the position that I'm in now at a different hospital, which is lead midwife for equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I remember one of my colleagues sending that to me, and it's quite a high banding job. Was a newly qualified midwife. I was like, as if, like, I can't go for that, surely, because they'll probably think that I've got such a cheek to even go for it. And she was really, she really encouraged me. My family, my friends encouraged me, kind of just saying, if you don't get it, you've not lost anything. You've actually gained experience for a high banding interview. So it's like, okay. So I did. It took ages to do my application. Like, really, it's a good application, if I do say so myself. Bearing in mind, though, that when I was working clinically in that time, I'd gone to the Black Maternal Health conference, and work had funded me to go on the basis that I come back and I kind of roll out what I've learned to all staff. So I got into kind of teaching Black maternal health that way as a
Oh,
band
wow.
6 midwife, which was really good. And I do think that really contributed to me getting this role. And off the back of that, I'd start through my Instagram. I'd started being asked by universities and midwifery societies to go and teach in their universities as well. So it was kind of, it was opening doors really.
Mm.
So I feel like that's why I got the job. And I remember the interview was something like 4 hours. And it was seen by so many people. But I remember coming out of that thinking, do you know what? I actually did really well then.
Good.
Didn't think I'd get it just off the basis of I'm a newly qualified midwife. But no, thankfully I got it. And yeah, the rest's history. That's the role that I'm in now, and that's opened many more doors for me this last year and a bit. So
That's amazing. And you've kind of brushed over the journey before that, but actually,
mm,
when you say about like your Instagram, like that on its own is amazing. Like you've done really well just as I suppose as an influencer and getting your name out there and getting your views out there and people listening to you. Like
yeah,
that, I mean, where did that even come from? What even gave you the confidence to do that? Because you're putting yourself out there, and from my personal experience, that I find that really uncomfortable. Personally, it's not easy.
yeah, yeah. So I started my Instagram, midwife Keelie, when I was a third year student. And it was kind of to just document my journey moving from the beginning of third year to qualified life, because I followed a few people who were doing the same, but and I could relate to what they were doing because obviously they were on the same degree as me, but they were all like the people who kind of had the most, like not following, but they were always coming up in my feeds. They were white people.
Mm.
And I felt like I couldn't relate to everything that way, because there's a few struggles that you go through as a student midwife, as a person of colour on its own, you know? So I thought, well, I'm going to do that. So I did it during third year, and I started to get a fair few followers of other student midwives, really. And then that's just kind of progressed on. It wasn't about Black maternal health or racial disparities, which it very much is now. It was kind of just documenting my student midwife journey, which then led to documenting my newly qualified journey, which so many people can relate to.
Mm.
And it's just naturally progressed to, I'm going to start talking about Black maternal health, because actually I don't agree with the fact that there's not much. Where's the uproar? Like I need to talk about it. So the more followers I got, I thought, well, I've got a platform and I need to do some good with it. And my passion is, Black and brown maternal and neonatal health. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you're using that platform for positivity, because not everybody does that. It's for the sometimes it's for the fame, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
personal gain. But you can
Yeah.
clearly see that you actually want to make a difference and you want to make a change. So,
Mm-hmm.
going into that new role, what was that like for you? Because I mean, I when I first met you was at the motherhood
Yeah.
conference. But
Yeah.
you was a speaker there. You wasn't
Mm.
there in the audience. You was actually speaking. So how
Yeah.
did you get from being in the audience to then being a speaker?
Yeah. So I'd gone in the audience the year before, and then last year's conference when we met, that was the year after when I was on the panel. So I was shocked myself. I mean, last year was the year, like loads of opportunities to go and speak publicly on Black maternal health. Last year was definitely the year. But no, that came from my Instagram, and like, obviously the connection that I've made with the motherhood group and other people. I mean, my Instagram's definitely opened some doors for me, and not doors in terms of me making this, and this out of it. I don't make anything out of my Instagram. I've been, given some opportunities to do that stuff, but that wouldn't be authentic at all. I don't want to make money off my Instagram by, influencing by like selling products or this and that. It's about raising awareness for something that is really, really, really significant, and it's not spoken about enough. So that's why I've got the platform, really. But yeah, it has come with its opportunities to get out into different spaces, which has been really good, and I feel really thankful for that.
Yeah, and what type of spaces have you been able to get into? Because I know like you was at the APPG
Yeah.
for baby loss, wasn't you? So I mean it's but for me, I think it's amazing to get a seat at the table and to get a foot in those rooms, because it's not that easy. I know from my own personal journey, it isn't that easy, especially for people that look like us as
Yeah.
well. And people are listening, like people are
Yeah.
actually listening to you. So for anyone else that wants to have an impact, that wants to do the type of work that we're doing, and that feels passionate about it, what advice or like any helpful tips that's helped you along the way, or even any of the struggles or the challenges that you've had to go through?
Yeah. I think so. I don't beat around the bush, and that's, sometimes works well, but sometimes it doesn't do me any favors either. But the way I see it is, if I am talking on things that make people feel uncomfortable and they don't like me for that, that's a them problem. When I first started my role, that really upset me, because I would really care about what people thought about me. I didn't want people to not like me. Um, but now, I've been in that space for a year, and it's not just that role. It's about, speaking in public spaces like the APPG, like in, really prestigious spaces like that. My belief is I'm not going to go and be wishy-washy and talk to really high up important people who are the change makers and just try and strive to make everyone in that room comfortable. Because actually, I, as a person of colour, I'm really uncomfortable at the fact that I and my black counterparts are so much more risk of dying in maternity care. to me, I am shocked and horrified by that and upset by that every single day. And it it blows my mind how I can, be in front of, certain people or certain roles and things. Most people do care, but there's always, the odd few
Mm.
who don't get it and or let their fragility take over the really important topics at hand that we're trying to discuss. So I think that I've become a bit known on social media, maybe, and within the NHS, probably, that I'm the person who speaks up when things aren't right. And I don't care anymore if that, means that I'm not going to make friends in my role. You know what I mean? Because I'm not
Mhm.
there to make friends, I'm there to improve outcomes for
Yeah, yeah,
people.
100%, and 100% get that as well. And again, that's applause to you because that again, that's I know that's not an easy journey to get to that
Yeah.
point as well. We all do as human beings. We all care about what people think of us. We all want to be liked and we all want to be accepted. But it is one of those things that often you find that having these conversations, they are difficult conversations, but they shouldn't be. This is the whole reason why I started this podcast because they shouldn't be difficult conversations. We should be able to have these conversations, but unfortunately, they are difficult conversations, and people do get their backs up, or they do
Yeah.
become defensive, or they do feel uncomfortable. But like you
Mhm.
pointed out, I think what's often forgotten is that people who look like us, we spend most of our life feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We're in
Exactly.
spaces quite often where we are the minority, and
Mhm.
people have these assumptions or these stigmas of people who look like us, and they don't always expect us to speak in the way that you speak, for example,
Yeah.
and to highlight things in the way that you do. And that's another thing that I really what's the word?
Commend.
Yeah, I really commend you because the way you explain things as well is really good. It really, I think it's really impactful and how you highlight, like, we're not necessarily talking about personal opinions or things like that, but when you talk about, like you said about the jaundice, for example,
Yeah.
like we're sticking with facts there,
Mhm.
and the fact is. England is a very multi country. Like we've got lots of
Mhm.
different cultures here. There's lots of different people who look very different, and there is lots of black and brown people in this country. So why are we just focusing on white babies? You
Yeah.
know, and if we do that, it's inevitable that babies of color are going to be more at risk,
Mhm.
have worse
Yeah.
outcomes. But yet, this is something that's happened in 2026, 2025, and we've
Yeah.
been aware of these disparities for a long time. And I think that's something that people forget about as well, because we've had a lot of these reports come out in the last 5 years, last 6 years, that are showing us the statistics. But if you ask people that have worked in the NHS for 20 odd years, they've all
Yeah.
been aware of this for
Yeah.
a very long time. And
Mhm.
but yet they've done nothing to change it. And I'm very much like you. It's something that I feel so passionate about. And I don't think it would make a difference what I looked like either to how passionate I feel about it, because I believe in equity. I believe that we should all be treated equally, and it shouldn't depend on how we look to what our
Absolutely.
outcomes are going to
Yeah.
be like.
Mhm.
And there really is very slow movement, isn't there, in this
Very
area?
slow. Yeah, very slow, uncomfortably slow,
Yeah.
because all of the data and research is there, staring us all in the face now. It has been for a long time. So we don't need any more reports. We don't need another annual report and nothing be done about it. Um, the way I see it is as well, and sometimes people feel uncomfortable when I say this, but if this was the other way round, and white women and birthing people and their babies were much more likely to die at much more alarming rates than black and brown people, I mean, this would have been nipped in the bud a long time ago, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, I know it's not quite the same. If you think about COVID, for example, and we think about the vaccination,
Yeah.
how many diseases have we had for over the years that we don't have vaccinations for? And then
Yeah.
COVID came out, and within 6 months or whatever it was, they've come up with a vaccination because they see it as a priority, and it's a world pandemic. So they've invested the time and the money to sort that out. So it's something like this, and there's quite a lot of it is quite simple solutions on how they can improve outcomes. But it just, I don't know, Do they not care? I don't know what the answer is, but the facts are there's little being done to make changes. I think now it's fully in your face, everyone's face, that we cannot hide from it. So the good thing is last year it was actually named. The racism was actually named
Yeah.
because they spent so long like hiding the fact
I
and trying
know.
to say, you know, well, it happens to all sorts of people and, things like
Hmm.
that. And we
Hmm.
know that statistics have come down. But again, I don't feel like people are talking that much and openly about how statistics are manipulated as
Yeah,
well.
but and it was 5 times more likely in 2020, and now I think, is it 2.9
Yeah.
times? So people see that as progress, but it's not progress because there's a maternity crisis going on at the moment anyway. Staffing shortages, and kind of just not great care across the board because of that. That's skewing the figures because white maternal deaths and baby deaths are going up, which is naturally bringing black statistics kind of down a bit. But actually, what they've said is it's not progress.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
progress.
And this is the thing. This is what I want to highlight. Like people, they will use that and hide behind that and say like, oh, it's coming down, it's coming down. But actually, in reality, these statistics are being manipulated. It's not giving us a true picture of what's going on. And then there's other things that impact that as well. Like less women are having babies. Are getting
Yeah,
pregnant less because of the fears and everything else, and what they know they're up against.
yeah,
So that manipulates the statistics as well, and it's in every aspect. I mean, I've done my own research, and I often talk about this on the podcast as well. That I research because because of my PTSD and how my brain works. I have to look at things myself and find out
yeah,
stuff for myself. And I spent a
yeah.
year researching um, how Black people of color, are impacted in every aspect of life, and literally in every aspect of life, we're at a disadvantage. Like
Hmm.
literally I couldn't find anywhere where we weren't. The only place was prison where the statistics were higher. But again, that's the adverse effect. It's still we're at a disadvantage because why are we overrepresented in the prison system, but not as much as what we do as a society.
Yeah,
And from
yeah,
when you're at a disadvantage from the womb, because that is what is the reality is, and people don't seem to understand that
yeah,
we're at a disadvantage from the womb. A baby of color has a
hmm,
less chance of survival than a white baby, which is
yeah,
absolutely ridiculous in a
hmm,
country like England, where it's meant to be one of the safest places in the world to
hmm,
give birth. And yet there's still little progress, even with regards to the neonate and maternity review. Like and don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing that because I do think the bits that I've seen, the bits that I've been involved with, I think Baroness Amos is trying her best.
hmm.
But I feel like she wasn't given the best platform in the first place to start with. For example, the fact that they called it a rapid
Yeah,
investigation.
yeah,
And do you know what I mean? And the fact that you said that we've got a maternity crisis across
hmm,
the UK, because if anybody was listening, it was to go and check the CQC website, for example, and check the ratings for maternity across the UK. You would struggle to find hospitals that rate good.
hmm.
Um, but so I feel like she in a little way was set up to fail because this was supposed to be wrapped up. What her part was supposed to be wrapped up by December, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But I am happy that she has delayed that and
yeah. It needed to
needed
be.
more time because she knows she needs more, and it's great that we've got a woman of color leading
Hmm.
this
Yeah,
investigation.
definitely.
But at the same time, I do worry: was that chosen because if things go wrong, then they have
Hmm.
a scapegoat as well. I know I'm sounding very cynical, but I think when you have the knowledge of what's actually going on, it's hard not to be cynical.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is hard to be positive,
Yeah, and I
isn't
think,
it?
and I do think that she's really trying, and I feel like I said, the bits that I've been involved with, I feel like she's actually listening to parents and taking on board and implementing that in her investigation. But even in regards to that, we've had new inquiries come out. Why are we, and even she's raised the same concerns. Why are we doing another inquiry
I
when
know.
we know that there's issues? I mean, we basically know what the issues are. So why are we not doing an action plan? Why are
Yeah,
we not saying this is okay, this is what we need to do now, rather than doing another
Mhm.
investigation. That
Mhm.
those are the things that I find frustrating because it's like it's a tick box, isn't it? It's to show like we are doing
Doing
something,
something.
but what are you actually doing?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just really hoping that, like you say, an actual, tangible action plan comes out of this that catches on to NH trusts quickly. Because all these frameworks and action plans and things come out for lots of different things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your local trust is implementing any of that straight away.
Yeah.
And it's an emergency. It really is an emergency. And yeah, it's difficult. But, it's institutional racism is what it is. If White's the normative standard on the midwifery curriculum, that's institutional racism. The MNSI, which is it's like an external body that does investigations at NHS trusts if somebody or a baby dies. So it's like an external investigation. They reported in 2023 that black and brown babies, it was an uptick of black and brown babies being diagnosed catastrophically late with jaundice because signs weren't visually detected. So, what are we doing about that? Because you've told us that. So, what are we doing? Now, I know that my trust is tackling that because I'm there as ED&I midwife. So, I've made that decision to tackle that. And lots of trusts are. But where's like the mandatory implementation for things? Because it shouldn't just be left to people to do if they want or if they
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
It has to happen, and funding needs to be arranged for that to happen. Yeah, it's
And
institutional racism, isn't it?
yeah. And there's no governing bodies either, is there? There's nobody overseeing the trust to make sure that they actually are implementing these things in a timely fashion and they're implementing all of it. Because from I'm not I disclaimer, I am not an expert in this area. Only little bits that I've read and done my research on. But up until recently, I believe that they could pick and choose which parts that they would implement, and not necessarily have to do the whole thing. Is that right?
Well, each trust and maternity unit has their own governance team, who like very senior midwives who overlook that. It depends what the framework is. It depends what the implementation is. It's all different, and it all comes down to funding, which is really depressing
Mm.
because when it comes down to funding, then in my experience, I've seen that other things take priority. But
Yeah.
what I keep trying to teach people is if we weave EDI, so or equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout everything that we do, and centre Black and Brown people and babies, then everything will improve for everybody else because
Yes.
it's equity.
Yeah.
But it's hard for people to catch on to that because I know that EDI is a bit new. You know, the EDI midwives do people's head in because we're constantly just carrying that torch of EDI, anti-racism, this and that. I think they get a bit fed up of hearing us, but that's what our role is. We
Mm.
have to keep speaking up. But then that's very weathering for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true because I agree 100%. And I often say, by looking after the most vulnerable, improving outcomes for them, of course, we're going to improve outcomes for everybody then,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's not, and it is something that I find that not all the time, but sometimes people do get defensive. And you'll often hear,
Mm-hmm.
well, other babies die too, or,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to recognize other people's stories, which it is. I agree
Mm-hmm.
100%. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not that by talking about what the disparities, we're not neglecting any other culture and
Mm-hmm.
what's going on for them. We're just
Yeah.
saying that the outcomes are worse
Mhm. Yeah.
for us. We're more at risk. Our babies are more likely to die. We're less likely to get the right support. All of those things that impact people who are part of society as well. So again, people don't even take that into account and how much that impacts somebody's mental health, for example. And then when they go into their job, how that impacts them or how it impacts their parenting with their other children or, and then if their children aren't parented properly, then that impacts the school and local
Mhm.
authorities in that way. And it really does impact the
Yeah.
society as a whole. Um, I've
Yeah.
lost my train of thought now. I've
No,
forgotten
I
what I was
agree.
saying. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was what I was going to say about the what we focus on the most vulnerable. We in effect helping everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping that's going to catch on more, 2026. But that's fact. That's been proven. So hopefully it's going to be onwards and upwards. It's definitely small steps at a time, though.
Yeah.
But it's, lots of it, like I said, comes down to funding. For example, another example of institutionalized racism. During COVID in 2020, we know that Black and brown people were dying at alarming rates, much higher rates compared to the white population. Now, a study was done in either 2020 or 2021 when clinicians had realised that the SAT probes, what you put on your finger,
Mm-hmm.
for neonates, pediatrics, or adults, you get SAT probes. Some of them are a bit different than each other, but it measures the oxygen in your blood. Clinicians had noticed during COVID that the results from the SAT probes didn't seem to be matching the clinical presentation of Black and brown people. So the machines were saying that their oxygen saturations were fine, but they clearly weren't presenting in a way that showed that their oxygen saturations were fine. So a study happened, and it was proven that all pulse oximeters, I can never say that word, but the SATS probe, all of them overestimate oxygen saturation percentage. So people can be struggling for oxygen, but the machine's saying they're fine, and that's been evidenced. An example of institutionalized racism is that we still use those exact same equipment across the NHS. So we're working with what we've got for Black and brown people then, knowing that that's a danger, but we're just going to still carry on using them, even though it's been evidenced that regulations weren't proper for that because they were more or less tested and calibrated on white people.
Oh, wow. Wow, that is shocking. That is really shocking. It's shocking,
Yeah.
but not shocking, if I'm honest. So
Yeah.
what is it like for you on a day to day then, having to do your job, work with the NHS? And I know that you obviously we all have to be professional, and it's one thing having our personal opinions, but it's another thing being at work and being professional. But
Mhm.
fighting for change, human beings don't like change. If we're honest,
No.
human beings don't like change.
Yeah.
So what has it been like for you having to be within the NHS and make progress from the inside?
Hmm. Difficult, if I'm being honest. It's difficult work in or out of the NHS, isn't it? Um, the NHS is an institution, and it's been evidenced. And I back up everything I say with evidence
Mm.
because I think that's important. But you can, listeners can go away and can look this up. But the NHS, it's been evidenced in society that institutions are racist. But if
Mhm.
we're thinking of, and we're not jumping straight to, oh, racist is in there, racist, so they want to see Black and brown people suffer. Institutionalized racism is kind of deeply ingrained. It's in the system, it's in the policy, it's in the guidelines. It's not necessarily, put together to harm people,
Mm.
but put together many years ago with only a certain population in mind. And that harms, the global majority. So if institutionalized racism has been evidenced to be a thing, then I'm working in a system that's institutionally racist. So that's difficult, and you can feel that from rubbing people up the wrong way with certain things that I might be pushing for to change. That's, like you say, not everybody likes change. So people can often kind of shut down and not really want to conversate with me
Mhm.
about certain things. Um, that so especially when, because I deliver mandatory education, so ED&I education. So I'd gone from teaching at universities, which I still do, and they're always a pleasure to teach, at student midwives, and I really think it's important to catch them before they qualify. And I absolutely adore teaching student midwives. They're always so happy to be there, bearing in mind that when I teach at universities, more often than not, it's the midwifery societies that have invited me because they've noticed the gaps on the curriculum. So they've took responsibility to raise funds to bring me in to deliver anti-racist education, which I think speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not there because they have to be, they're there because they want to be. So that shift when I'm teaching, you know, registered midwives who are there because they have to be, it is a completely different vibe.
I can
And I
imagine.
was, yeah, I was a bit naive in that I'd gone to my first few sessions really excited to teach because that's what I love doing. Especially those teaching moments where people aren't necessarily on board at the beginning, but something clicks, and by the end, you know, that's so rewarding. And creating that safe space for people to have these uncomfortable conversations together, I find really rewarding and positive. But yeah, I naively went into it thinking it was going to be all sunshine and roses, and it wasn't. So that kind of gave me a bit of a reality check.
Yeah, I bet. And I think there are probably some old heads in the organization as well that have been working in the organization for a very long time and have that mentality. If it's not broken, we don't need to fix it, but it is broken. And people
Yeah,
don't always want to admit that it is broken, but it is.
yeah. But then often, you know, it could be anyone. It ranges in age, it ranges in, you know, duration being in the NHS, surprisingly. Um, but often problematic people who don't believe that the system's broken in this perspective, in terms of disparities, but will be very open to having the conversation of where it is broken in something completely different. And
Right.
that's what strikes me. So
Okay.
you know it's broken in some ways, but you just don't. It's an uncomfortable truth to say that it's broken in this way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of people don't like the words racism, do they? And
No.
it's again, like you said earlier, it's not always in your face, and especially in this country, it's very subtle. It's
Mhm.
hidden. It's not something that we can always openly say, and it's without and sometimes it's really hard without research as well, without having these conversations. I found out myself, just for my experience with my pregnancies, I didn't realize that there's so many other women who experience similar things to
Yeah.
me. And it's only by doing this podcast and doing my own research and looking into things to see that actually that wasn't things weren't okay, or I wasn't listened to, or I
Yeah.
wasn't given the correct treatment or whichever. And but somebody else who looks different to me got a very different treatment to me, because you don't know, do you? You're not in the room with those people, so you don't know what's going on. But how do you how do you manage those challenges?
Challenges, as in,
So all of it. So if you're coming up against somebody that is very pig-headed and is adamant, no, no, this is how things are, or even just having that disheartened feeling, like you said, going
mm,
into a session really excited, and then you're coming
mhm.
out feeling, I'm sure there's going to be times where you've come out feeling really deflated, a little bit like, oh, why am I doing this kind of work? What I'm doing? Am I banging my head against a brick wall, sort of?
Yeah, yeah. So it comes with many challenges. That one, when I'm talking about, you know, just feeling like I'm banging my head against a wall and can't get through to people, I'd say I'm not. I haven't overcome that challenge yet. I feel like that often. Just being honest, it's really difficult, and there's always going to be people that don't want to hear what I've got to say. So I've improved because it really frustrated me at first, but I think I've gained a lot more. This job has really taught me to be resilient. I can switch off from it a bit more now. You know, I used to come home upset. I used to, you know, drive myself up the wall of what can I do? What, you know, I'm not going to get through to everyone, and that's okay because it's not my sole responsibility to get through to everybody. So my goal in this role really is to really guide people to make EDI the golden thread throughout everything they do. I can't do that on my own, but I can teach and support you how to do that and how to help your teams do that because it's a collective responsibility. And that's what I've got to remember, really. I think often I naturally, because I care so much about it, I naturally just take everything on. Whereas now I'm a bit more realistic about things. And if I'm like this with so many things to take on, people aren't listening, they're not listening, I've got this to do, that to do, this to do, I'm not going to get anything done because I'm going to burn out and then I'm no use to anybody. So I'm just a lot more realistic in my priorities now. And I've just got a bit of a thicker skin in that it doesn't matter if people don't like me, because if the problematic people don't like me because I'm speaking truth about racism and how it is killing Black and brown people in maternity, I don't want them to like me anyway. We're
Mm,
never going to get on, and
yeah.
that's fine. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's amazing. So you put boundaries in place basically then for yourself as well, and
Yeah.
I always say we can't help everyone, but everyone can help someone.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good, and I think that's good for other people to hear as well that are trying to do work in this
Mm.
industry because it is hard. It can be lonely, it can be isolating, it can be frustrating, and
Mm.
just looking at the disparities alone, they're depressing. That's the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, I've surrounded, when we're talking about all the different events that I do. So I'm based in the north, so all of the big events and things around this tend to go on in London, which
Mm,
is fine. And I try and make sure I go to all of that to learn. Um, but it means that I've found my people, in similar roles, in people like yourself, or the midwives, or the charities, or the organisations who are really, fighting the good fight. We've all got a common goal, you know, and we all just get it. That's the thing. And that's not always what I'm used to where I live. It's not very diverse. Where I live or where I work, I don't get that. So when I, go to these events and I see you all, it's like a breath of fresh air.
yeah.
Like I don't even have to say anything and we just know.
Hmm.
You know
Yeah. It
we
is.
just
It is a beautiful space, isn't it? I think people often think because we're looking at poor outcomes and things like that, they often think, oh, it's a
yeah.
space you don't want to be in. But actually, it's such a welcoming and supportive space to be in. And I've rarely met anybody that hasn't got integrity, in this space. Like
Yeah.
it genuine, and it can be a boost, can't it?
It is. And then we can, we often share the work that we're doing. We give each other ideas, might vent to each other, help each other out of tricky situations. So that's nice and helpful.
Oh, that's good. So boundaries, support network,
Yeah.
and just learning not to take on too much and not to take things too personal because the reality is it's not people don't they're not disliking you, they're disliking what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't take that to heart anymore. And really I feel bad for them in a way, because I feel bad for them is in I think most people hear something in the education that I deliver. They might not hear all of it, but there's something in there that hits them somewhere. And if they're a person that really just blocks that out and just can't take that on board and just would prefer to sweep it under the rug because it's uncomfortable, they don't want to talk about it. I just don't know how people can work like that. You
Mm,
know, there's mistakes that I'm going to make as an ED&I lead midwife because I actually am not. I don't belong in every marginalised group. I don't live the same experience as somebody, a Black woman who is from the LGBTQ community. We don't share the same lived experience. So all I can do is speak to the different communities, acknowledge their concerns and what the risks are, and really try my best to help them feel safe by elevating their voices and asking what it is that they need. If I make a mistake, I would want whoever it is, whether it's staff, whether it's a member of the community, to hold me accountable. And I would always be sincerely sorry and ask what I can do better next time and not let that deter me from doing better next time. And that's all it is. And that's what I try and say in my educational sessions. I might be talking about something that makes you really uncomfortable, something that you may have done in the past. There's no judgment from me because we're not living in the past. It's what we're doing moving forward. And I'd hope that after this session that you'd change that, and work differently next time. But I think often, if people are sat in that kind of uncomfortable, fragile, defensive space, you don't always hear that and they feel judged.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's
And
what
that
comes through
yeah
too.
That's really good to hear as well, because it isn't about judgment. It isn't about criticism necessarily. We're just about it's about improving the
Hmm.
services that people are receiving. And how do we do that? By learning.
Yeah,
I always say, I used to work with young children. I always say there's no such thing as mistakes, only lessons learned. But
yeah,
if you don't learn the lesson, it is a mistake.
hmm,
So we have to learn for it not to be a mistake,
yeah,
and to be able to improve. But we can't do that if we're defensive, because we're not listening, and we shut down. Like you say, you shut down. And I've often find that, see, the space that I work in is baby loss predominantly. Obviously,
yeah,
I am an advocate for maternal mental health care altogether, but
hmm,
my expertise is in baby loss. And majority of the people I speak to, it's that of not being listened to, and people not taking accountability. I think that's the biggest thing that comes from the NHS, say, that I hear often, is that they don't admit fault where there's fault. They always trying to cover up or give excuses as to why this happened or why that happened. And if they were just to say that we made a mistake, we were wrong, and we're sorry, and this is what we've learned from it, and we're going to do this to make sure it doesn't happen again,
yeah,
it would appease people so much more, and it
exactly,
and it would improve outcomes as well.
exactly. It's very defensive practice. Sorry, very defensive practice. So the fixes, there's loads of fixes that need to be made. And yes, lots of that is for senior leadership and for, top level NHS and funding, which isn't necessarily something that a clinical midwife can change. However, the changes that clinical midwives and support workers can change are really easy.
Mm.
Listen to Black women and birthing people.
Yeah, I think it's really important to ask people what they want. I personally think it's a very ambitious ask to expect people to be culturally aware or culturally sensitive with everything, because there's so many different cultures, and there's so much different cultures within cultures.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to know everything about every culture. So I think it's unrealistic to expect people to, but it's a simple solution. Just ask people what's
Hmm.
important to you. How
Yeah.
can I help you? What's going to make a difference to you?
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, it's simple. To
Hmm.
me, it's simple. Like, I don't understand what's so complicated about it. Instead of
Hmm.
telling people, because that often is what happens, they tell you how you should feel or what's going on. Yeah, and all those things. And it's like, just listen
Yeah.
and actually hear, really listen and hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
Um,
And have
so,
sensitive conversations. Ask questions that might make you as a clinician feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you can't give equitable care without asking the person in front of you what they want and what they need. And also, when you think about the Black community and the brown communities, can be quite distrustful, and rightly so, of the NHS due to, historic concepts and all of that, which we go into in my education because I believe it's important for them to
mhm.
get that kind of understanding of where this all comes from.
It's
That's why
generational trauma, isn't it? It's ingrained.
yeah,
A
it
lot of it's
is.
ingrained in us. We do without even thinking. We don't even know the whys as to why we do that, but we're
Yeah,
taught that's what we're supposed to do, so we just do
yeah,
it.
yeah. And if we're distrustful of the NHS, we might come in to our antenatal appointment with our barriers up. And we need you as the midwife to break those barriers down and, help us kind of build that trust together. And that is by asking, what is it you need? How can I make you feel safe
Mm.
when accessing care? And sometimes people are shocked when I say this, but it's about acknowledging the disparities
Mhm.
because when you're ignoring it, a lot of Black women, for example, will be coming into their antenatal appointments scared because they know about the disparities. They've had a spotlight shone upon them the last few years,
Mhm.
more so than ever before, really. Often, I've got women who come to me as ED&I lead who, they want to have a conversation with me because they're very well read on the statistics and they're frightened about it. And they're not feeling that they can have a conversation in a 20-minute antenatal appointment. And, often it's just not raised. But by acknowledging it and speaking and talking about what we're doing as a organisation to combat that, it's going to put someone's mind a lot more at ease than just ignoring it because it makes us feel uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable accessing care.
Yeah, that's it. I was about to say the same thing. It's acknowledging that if you feel uncomfortable, then how are they feeling? They're probably
Yeah,
feeling 10 times more uncomfortable than you
yeah,
are. So actually, let's put that to one side and let's make everybody in the room feel comfortable by,
yeah.
addressing the elephant in the room.
You do, exactly.
It's as simple as show it, saying that I am aware and I do care and I want
Mhm.
better for you.
Yeah.
I think most people would genuinely believe that and take that on board, and that's already started the building of trust there already.
Exactly. And when you mentioned kind of not everybody's going to be fully culturally competent either, and that's fine. I don't believe in the term cultural competence,
Mm.
to be fair, because like you say, there's so many cultures within cultures. We're never going to be culturally competent. But if we're culturally curious, having these conversations at each point of contact, learning about their culture, asking them, polite questions about them, their families, their cultures. And, if they've got a different culture to our own, asking, are there any kind of birthing traditions that, you in your, like within your culture that you might like to do for us to put in your birth plan? That's creating rapport,
Hmm. Yeah,
creating a bit of a relationship and a bit of an understanding, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and it's opening the doors as well, isn't it, for them people to say, oh, actually, this person's interested, so I can actually be open and honest with them, and
Yeah,
I can tell them these things, and then it opens the door for other things. So if there's other stuff going on, then they're more likely to open up about that as
yeah,
well. It's just
yeah,
instead of making, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions made as well. Like I spoke to another lady who's a midwife before when I first started doing the podcast, and something that's always stuck with me that she made a comment about that when you go to see your midwife when you first find out you're pregnant, you have one of your first appointments, and you go for your green book and things. Like one of the questions that she's noticed that what happens is when they ask about the partner, so for example, if it's a white lady, they might say, "How is dad? How's he feeling about the pregnancy?" And then if it's a black woman, they might ask, "Is dad still around? Is the father still
oh
around?"
gosh.
Yeah, and things like that, making those assumptions, and already you're kind of putting a negative tone on things straight away, and closing those doors a little bit as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's just going to put the barriers straight back up, isn't it? That's microaggressive anyway, and it's really important for as part as anti-racism training for that, to be included. Really, people often do that without thinking, and often if you professionally challenge that, it can be really hard for them to understand what they've done.
Hmm.
Which is why it's really important for people to just be positive in just feeling uncomfortable for a minute and to just reflect on ourselves and then acknowledge it and do better next time. That's all it is. Apologize and move on. But yeah, I see that often. Yeah, and women often tell me about kind of assumptions. Assumptions are dangerous anyway, can really impact poorly on the care that you provide.
Yeah. Well, and that's in regards to anybody. It doesn't matter, does it, what you look like? If we make so many
Exactly.
assumptions, then that's where we make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
that saying about assumptions. um, but so what I'm actually really interested in as well, though. So you started your consultancy business as well. So what led you to do that, and how's that been for you?
So it's probably been about 5 months that's been, when I say up and running, it takes time, doesn't it? And I'm taking my time with it rather than going all in, because I've got to remember, obviously, I've got my NHS role. I came up with that last year because naively thought that I was going to go into this specialist NHS role and like change the world for everyone in the region that I'm in. Um, and really, improve things. Yes, I'm improving things, but a lot slower than I was hoping. And I actually thought, yes, I need to be in the NHS to make a difference because that's working in the system. But
Mhm.
I actually think that I feel like I can make faster change outside of the system. And I think both of them working together will kind of complement each other, really. So the consultancy, just as a disclaimer, I don't do in the region that I work in for the NHS, but it's for Black and Brown families because of the racial disparities. That's, I mean, anyone can access, consultancy with me or antenatal education with me. However, it's my main goal is to improve outcomes for marginalised communities. So I offer one-to-one antenatal education, and it's not your regular antenatal education in terms of like, we do birth prep and, you know, what's packing your hospital bag, you know, positive relationship with your baby, bonding with baby. We do all of that, which is kind of general, but it's actually about how to navigate the system as a Black expecting parent to be, which I think is really important. And it's completely different to how a white British pregnant person was to navigate it. And I think that really is important. But I do that, but it's also about offering consultancy to NHS trusts and also to universities to look to try and decolonise the curriculum. So
I
yeah.
think that's I think it's great. And so what has that been like starting that alongside your role? Because most organizations you have to sign disclaimers and all of that stuff, conflict of interest and things like you said you don't do it in your area. And is that why? Because of a conflict of interest?
Yeah. So I've put it down as a conflict of interest anyway, just in case, but it's not, because it would be, as far as I'm aware, it would be a conflict of interest if I was working in the same area that I'm an NHS midwife. And, you know, people are using Nya Birth Collective resources. They come into my antenatal education and they're accessing care at the same hospital that I'm an NHS midwife at. That would definitely be a conflict of interest. So yeah, I keep it separate and it's all kind of documented.
Okay. And have your employers, your managers, I think, have they been supportive of that?
Um, I wouldn't necessarily say supportive, but I wouldn't say they've not been supportive either. They know that I do it, and it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good because I know sometimes I mean, obviously NHS is a bit different because it's such a big organization, but I know that a lot of sort of companies can be a bit funny
Yeah,
sometimes on how it impacts them. And
yeah, definitely. And I could, and I'd expect them to be if I was providing this care on a self-employed basis in the region that I work at. And I'd get that. But because I keep them very, very separate, you know, I'll deliver antenatal education sessions to, you know, mostly it's been women down south, you know, families down south, and I'm in the north. So it's online as well. So I've not come across anyone from that region. And if I did, I'd have to say I can't. You wouldn't
okay.
be able to. Yeah.
Well, that I mean that. How do you do it? How do you manage it all? Like being a single mum, having your role within the NHS, and now having your consultancy company.
Mm.
And I mean, I see your social media, like you're very active, like, and I know what it takes to do those. A post that can be, 90 seconds can take a long time to create
Yeah.
sometimes. So, people don't realize how much actual work goes
Right.
into it. So, how do you manage it all? Again, for people that are listening that, want to do similar things and take on stuff, how do you manage the workload and keep your sanity?
So my job within the NHS is part-time and it's quite flexible as well. So I can make that work around my son a lot easier than I could as a clinical midwife. So that is really great. Like I love that. And then in my days off, I'm doing Nya Birth Collective, basically.
Okay,
And
okay.
then add on, you know, single mum life and, you know, all the events I go to. Sometimes I think I don't know how I actually do that, but I'm not burnt out. I'm not tired or anything. So I just keep going until I start to feel a little bit, it's a bit too much and I might take my foot off the gas a little bit, but girls got to work.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But I am a very big advocate for, self-care and
Yeah,
well-being. And
yeah,
so, I just you do that's good to know that you listen to your body and you'll take time when you need to take time because I'm very like I say I always promote that. I've
yeah,
learned the hard way. I've burnt out a few times.
yeah, yeah. I burnt out very close to when I started my new specialist role. So, and when I'm stressed, I really feel that in my body. And I have felt a couple of times in the role I've been in for the last year that I'm like, when I'm creeping towards that space again, I know when it's happening, and I have to take a bit of time out. It's a stressful job. I feel like the stress is from the job itself rather than the amount of things I have to do. And it mainly comes from trying to get my voice heard, and I'm not always heard. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine. It is, I think for a woman anyway, sometimes it's difficult anyway to be heard, especially a woman of color, and then especially a woman of color talking about the
Mm.
issues, the racism and things like that, the topics that the English people don't like to talk about because
Yeah. And you can see people switch off as well, especially when you're going into a space and you're the only person of colour in the room and you're about to start talking about racism, and people feel uncomfortable about that, but forget that I feel more uncomfortable talking about that, being the only person of colour in the room. I find that quite daunting sometimes. And then when you're talking about it and you can, we're not talking about that again, are we?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So I find that hard. But no, I do need to be better with self care. And I actually go to my best friend. She lives in a different city to me, but she's got me into this group called Ubuntu,
Okay.
which means I am because we are, which I think is really beautiful. And it's all about community. And it's the city has had funding for like what's the word, like improving the mental health of the global majority of that city.
Okay.
So they came up with Ubuntu, and it's once a month, and it's a circle, men and women, or non-binary, or whatever. It's not just one side. It's all of us together, people of color, and it's kind of, you're doing, Rastafari drumming. You've got the incense going. You've got the essential oils. You've got the talking sticks. Movement, yoga.
Mm.
And at first I was like, it took her a year to get me to go to that. And I was a bit like, oh, I don't know whether that's my vibe. But I actually, the last few months, I feel like I'm getting a bit more spiritual. So I find that that's my self care, doing a bit of meditation before I go to bed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I am such a big advocate for things like that, for movement and really
Yeah.
listening to your body. Like I love yoga. Yoga saved my life
Oh,
after I lost my
really?
son. Yeah, that was at the time when I was in the depth of my grief. That was the only thing that could help me. I felt.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I've done a lot of research into it as
Okay.
well. And
Mhm.
there is a lot of evidence out there to show how it helps with stress and it helps with trauma and how important it is for us to move
Yeah.
and to listen to our bodies because we've had these tools for centuries, but we've just learned to ignore them.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
tapping back into that to listen to our bodies, to know that a headache can mean that you're stressed. Not
Mm.
that it's not a cold, it's you're actually really stressed, or you might need more sleep, or that tummy ache is because of that issue you're dealing with at work, not because you've got a stomach bug, or it's those things like that. Learning to listen to your body, like you said, now when you're getting to the point of burnout, like
Mm.
I'm the same. I know when it gets too much, I need to take some time. I need to make sure that I'm doing my yoga or doing whatever it that I need to do to empty my cup or to fill my cup, whichever way you want to do it. Uh,
Yeah.
but it is, I think it's really important. And there's so much, so there's so much evidence out there, and so many people don't take it seriously, actually, how
Mm.
how much it can help people. So especially meditation as well. We have so much going through our minds that
Mhm.
we can't always switch off. And I mean, I meditate. I'm rubbish at it because my mind doesn't stop. But
Yeah, I'm not the best. I try though.
yeah, but I try, and just by taking that moment to try, I still am slowing things down, and I'm giving myself that time for myself, which is
Yeah,
important.
exactly. Yeah, and they kind of, the Ubuntu's taught me better ways to meditate, because when I used to try before that, my eyes would be closed, but they'd still be flickering because I'm so on the ball all the time. I literally just feel uncomfortable to just be still, and trying to get into that routine was really difficult, but I naturally do that now. And it's just when I'm going to bed, and I'll often fall asleep from a meditation now, but then I sleep through all night and I've not woke up in the night thinking about work. So it is helping me. It's just finding the time to do it. And I make a very conscious effort to do that every night now. And it's
Yeah.
helping me.
Yeah, and this is the thing, isn't it? It's prioritizing. Again, I think that's how our society is, how we've been taught not to prioritize ourselves, and
Yeah,
we're built to be machines and to
yeah,
go out and to, keep the economy going rather than keep ourselves going.
yeah. That's so true.
Yeah, so it is about finding the time, but it's even just 5 minutes. So anyone that's listening, even 5 minutes can be really beneficial, and we can all find 5 minutes to
Yeah.
do those things. Even like I say, just like I've done a lot of research into the vagus nerve and how that can support us
Oh
to
wow.
help relax and to get out of that traumatic state.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, you'll have to tell me more about that.
Oh yeah, you definitely have a look up vagus nerve. I have to see if I've got my
Yeah.
little sheet that I can send you where all the different points in your body and stuff. But just by tapping into that can
Mm.
take you in it almost instantly out of a traumatic state. And there's different ways we can do that. We could literally can cover your right eye and look up and
Oh,
do your
really?
breathing with it. But it's activating the trauma activates the right side of our brain, doesn't it? And we need to then balance that out by activating the left side of our brain.
Right, okay.
That's and by doing that, that's what we're doing, and it can. I try and test it myself if if I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I
Yeah.
do that, and it does work. It will breathe
Okay.
through your left nostril. There's points behind our ears, and in our
Mm.
diaphragm, there's points where it's the biggest nerve that we've got, and it's attached to the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's how we can tell ourselves that we're calm and we're safe, and we can.
Right.
So
Brilliant.
like I say, that we don't even realize we're doing it. Even just dancing in your kitchen to your favorite song is
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah. Well, they taught us at Ubuntu to do the tapping on the different parts of
Hmm.
your face, um, which I started doing because I was a bit of a nervous wreck a few months ago when I was doing my mandatory education. Like I wouldn't be able to sleep before the night before, and then I'd be outside waiting to go in, and my hands would physically be shaking. That is not me at all. But I
Hmm.
got myself into this kind of space with it just being the only person of color most of the time in that room, 20, 30 midwives, and really having to justify the black lived experience all the time really, really at one point made me just feel ill, to be honest with you.
Mm.
But the tapping and the meditation helped me. I'd sit and I'd do the tapping like 10 minutes before I was due to go in, just to kind of ground myself a little bit. So it does
Yeah,
work.
okay, yeah, and yes, that's the thing, and it's. I mean, I always say it's about what's funny and what helps for you and what's right for you. What works
Yeah.
because we all have different things. But it is that I've never done tapping until recently. But again, that works again with the vagus nerve, depending on where you're tapping as well. But
Right.
it's people. I think I worked in support for decades, like when, in management, and I've supported some of the most vulnerable people, and I've heard such horror stories. But I never really understood mental health. I thought I understood mental health
Mm.
until I then started to experience what I've experienced with my PTSD and anxiety, and the anxiety. I had the similar thing to you after I lost my son, where my hands would just shake
Right.
and I couldn't stop it. And I used to find it so frustrating. Sometimes it still happens now and then. I find it
Mm.
so frustrating because I'm telling myself, stop shaking, but I just
Yeah.
can't stop it.
Does it
Um,
come out of nowhere?
yeah, well, it was after I lost Zion that I started to experience.
Yeah.
I always say, I remember hanging the washing out and my hands were shaking and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the penny dropped and I was like, oh, this is anxiety.
Yeah.
It was the yoga. The only thing that helped me with the anxiety
Um,
was the yoga. That's why I always say it saved my life because,
yeah.
and that is for I don't know, I'm not an expert, but my rationale behind it is because by doing the yoga, it made me stop. It made me make time for myself,
Hmm.
made me connect back with my body and start to listen to my body. And by doing that, I allowed my mind to rest and
Yeah.
regain control as
Yeah.
such.
Definitely. No, it's really interesting. It really is interesting. And it's frustrating that I was kind of a bit, I don't believe in any of that really for so long because now I've felt the effects of it. It's a shame, really, because I think that could have helped me through lots of stuff.
Yeah, I'm so pleased for you because I love it. I absolutely love it, and I know often people think, oh, it's woo woo or whatever. It's but there's science. There's so much science behind it,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
it really does work. So yeah, I'm pleased that you've discovered that, and I'm
Yeah, me
excited for your
too.
journey.
Thank you.
Oh. And thank you so much for coming on today. Is there anything that you would like to add or um, talk about? Is there any experiences that you've supported people through as well that you'd like to speak about? Because it's the podcast we talk about grief and
Yeah.
baby loss, and so
Mhm.
for anybody that's listening, if there's any experiences that you've gone through or supported people through, and things that you found that worked or didn't work for them, or things that could have been different to improve outcomes
Mhm.
or experiences.
I think one of the main things for me is, and in my experience and other midwives' experiences and student midwives, your education on the degree for bereavement is minimal, which is a shame. You are kind of thrown into that once you're qualified. I think sometimes you can do elective placements on some degrees. So I think sometimes if people are lucky, they can go and maybe work with the bereavement teams or whatever as part of their elective that they choose to do. But most often, in my experience and the people that I've spoken to, it's quite minimal exposure, which doesn't, it's, not off to a great start then, are you? So my experiences with working with women and families who have experienced loss has been as a clinical registered midwife, and they'll all stick with me, obviously, because it's,
You say
it's such
obviously.
a
You say obviously, and I'm glad you said that, but that's not always the case.
really,
When I lost my son, majority of the professionals that was involved, with less than 6 months later, had forgotten about me. My community
wow,
midwife, she didn't even remember me less than 6 months later when I fell pregnant again.
wow,
I'm the consultant.
wow. And do you feel that would be the same if you were a white woman?
Now that I know what I know now, probably not. At the time, I didn't know any better.
No, no,
Um,
no.
but now that I know, I know when I look at my treatment and for the research and the things that I know now, that I follow that similar pattern.
Hmm. It's it. I have no words for that because it's just absolutely not acceptable, is it? How do you?
The irony is, they know me now. Well,
Yeah,
most of the time they do forget me after for a minute, and then I can see the whole process on their face when the penny drops. But they
yeah.
know me for the one that makes complaints.
You're the troublemaker now.
Yeah.
You can join me in being the troublemaker. That's okay. Yeah, and that is what we're remembered for because we're the people that dare open our mouths.
Hmm.
You know. For me, my experiences with people who have experienced loss, I feel like I would, wherever they were on their pregnancy journey, where I entered kind of their care, I feel like I would remember. That's just me. I know that not everyone's the same, but the experiences that I've had with families has been the intrapartum period. So the delivery of baby and kind of the aftermath of that. Um, so they've definitely they were an experience that I'll never forget. There was one woman who um, had a stillbirth at more or less. I feel like she was 36 or 37 weeks, so more or less full term. And I wasn't. I think I was still a band five then, so very newly qualified, and I was handed over the care. And I remember it being a matter of looking through the documentation and getting the handover. It seemed it was judgmental. So this woman was an asylum seeking woman. She was there on her own. They didn't know why she was there on her own, not asking questions. There was a language barrier, adequate interpretation services weren't used. There's a lot of Google Translate used, which is just a no-go. So they didn't have the full picture on her because they just weren't having conversations. Um, but I remember, in the notes, you know, did not attend appointment at this and at this gestation, did not attend appointment at this gestation. And I remember just thinking, she's an asylum seeking woman who hasn't been in the country long, and she's probably DNA'd the appointments because she's not got the means to get there. Like, has anyone had that conversation with her?
Mm.
And I just remember I remember linking into the professional interpreter, and she told me through the interpreter that that's the first time that anyone's done that
Oh
in the
wow.
whole of the care. So we had a full conversation because that's obviously what we need to
Mm.
do. And obviously what I want to do. I want to have conversation with her. I want to talk to her. I want to make her feel safe. But I just remember the shock on her face that this was even something that you could do, you
Mm.
know? And I just remember thinking how awful of an experience that is anyway, how vulnerable she was to then add on top of that, being new to the country, not speaking the language, unsure of how to access services, living, in accommodation in poverty, communal living with, and there was just zero empathy. That was the vibe that I got from documentation and handovers and things. And I remember thinking, I want to change that. That,
Mm.
that can't happen to anyone again. And it's just a shame because that kind of care, does happen,
Mm.
sadly.
Yeah.
But care for asylum seeking communities is a whole other ball game as well, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it's the intersectionality then, isn't it? Black and brown people who, don't have citizenship, all of the stuff that's going on at the moment in our country, the increase of racism, hostility towards Muslim people, all of those intersectionalities, you put them massively at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that word intersectionality as well, because that's something again that I focus on it, and we heavily focus on at Zion's Lighthouse as well. And I'm
Yeah.
always reminding people of that. It's not
Mhm.
just about being a woman of color. It could be a woman of color that's living in poverty or has spent her whole life having to face challenges and fight to be heard. And
Yeah.
just doing that alone causes
Mhm.
stress on the body and can
Mhm.
affect our immune system and
Yeah.
affect outcomes. Just to be heard, just to have a voice.
Yeah.
And that's not even including any other things that could be going on. This is for anybody, for domestic violence, living in poverty, broken families, trauma, generational trauma. I've worked because I worked in support and I worked with multiple people, and I've worked with ranging from as young as I think about 10, 9 or 10 to
Yeah.
102. Like that's how much it's ranged. I worked with children, I worked in retirement living.
Uh-huh.
And we've all got different experiences that impact us and how we take information in, how we process that information, and
Yeah.
that then information impacts us physically as well as mentally as well.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
So
It
frustrating.
affects the whole nervous system, doesn't it? And I mean, I say this to people often because where I work in the NHS, we have a very large demographic of asylum seeking and refugee families who are now actually getting continuity of carer. They're being caseloaded by a team, which is really positive, and it's been proven to improve outcomes. But I often say it's the tone. It's the tone of things that I can pick up on now. I don't know whether I'm just more in tune to that now because I'm in this position, but you know, they don't often come to appointments, do they? Or they DNA a lot, or they don't speak much. But it's like, well, what can you do to help them
Yeah.
speak then? Because there's a reason the vulnerable, the scared, they don't speak the language. We're not offering adequate interpretation services all the time. And that's a nationwide thing that needs improving for everyone. If we was to put ourselves in their shoes, if we were to go to, I don't know, another country somewhere and we didn't speak the language and we've gone into labor, like how scary is that?
Yeah.
So scary. Add on that then someone having a loss, being asked to fill in all of this paperwork. They can't read it because they
Mm.
don't speak English. Not getting that support to kind of go over all of that stuff. And as well, like the things that we offer in bereavement. So there's trusts that will offer, a kind of general, like yearly memorial service, which is lovely. And I don't want to kind of come down on that, because I think that's a gorgeous way for everyone to kind of opt in if they want to remember their babies in that way. But that's not equitable for everybody. Not everybody wants to do that. So do we have kind of equitable alternatives for people of different faiths, different cultures, people who aren't might not be religious, people who are religious? It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And that's what I find in bereavement care. It's kind of just pretty standard this way, or you go and sort your own thing out, you know?
And it also could be it's a postcode lottery, so it does depend on where you live to what type of support that you're given.
Yeah, yeah.
Some areas are very good and they have specialist support, or even those that do have specialist support, sometimes though they still can't help you. You know, I was, it was the irony of, I've been told off the back of my complaint that they introduced the Oceans team at my local hospital
Right.
to help support bereaved mothers who
Yeah.
suffer PTSD after losing a
Yeah.
baby. And when I did a self-referral 2 years after losing my son,
Mhm.
they came back and told me I was too complex for them. They can't help me.
Did
And
they
they,
give you a reason?
because I've experienced so much trauma, this is
Wow.
done the trauma research because a lot of the organisations that offer bereavement support, majority of them are charities. Then it's
Yeah.
not through the NHS.
Yeah.
Majority are charities, which we know is done by funding. And when you get funding, there's always strict criteria around the
Yeah.
funding, and most of the time it's you can only talk about baby loss,
Mhm.
to only talk about the loss, the baby loss. But as we know, when it comes to trauma, if somebody's experienced trauma, it's very likely that then resurfaces any past trauma that you've had, and then to be able to manage all of that trauma, you need to address it all. We can't
Yeah.
bury it under the pick and choose which ones we're going to address and which
Mm.
ones we're not.
Mhm.
So when I lost my son, that's what happened to me. Basically, I'd realised at that point that actually I've experienced quite a lot of trauma throughout my life. I mean, I lost my dad when I was 6 years old in a car crash.
Oh,
So
wow.
that on its own is traumatic, and
Trauma.
that's from
Yeah.
6 years old.
Yeah.
And there's been lots of moments through my life where there's been, but because I've had that mentality, which a lot of people, a lot of people of color, I believe, I'm stereotyping here and generalizing here, but from my own family experience and friends, we often have this culture that we just got to keep it moving. Just got to
Don't talk
push
about it
through.
much.
Yeah, we just house business is house business. Everyone has hard lives. We just got to keep it moving. We just got to push through. And that's the mentality I had for a very long time. So anytime anything happened, it was like, I'm strong. I'm a strong woman. I can just move through this. It's got to keep on
Mhm.
going. Like even my miscarriages. My first one I experienced while I was at work. I went to A&E. I went
Mhm.
back to work. You know,
Yeah.
um, I
You
just
just
pushed.
got on with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I lost Zion, I couldn't do that.
No.
Everything because I'd pushed through so much stuff.
Yeah.
Everything
I
resurfaced.
came to a head.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Pandora's box was like, phew. And
Yeah.
but nobody would touch me. Like that because there was too much. I was too complex, so they had to. I got referred to the community mental health team, but that was after years of going through the NHS and
Mm.
being given, 6 sessions, counselling sessions, or
Yeah.
and then if I needed more, I had to apply for more and justify why I needed more. I mean, I just lost a bloody baby.
Yeah.
Why would you think 6 sessions was ever going to be enough?
Yeah.
And then I was
Exactly.
put on CBT. No, I was put on PTSD training, but it was just general to learn about PTSD
Okay.
to
So
keep
not
me
specific.
going. Yeah, no, it was just to keep me going while I was on the waiting list. And
No.
then they decided off the back of that I qualified for CBT therapy. Even though I'd said to them I want EMDR therapy, I've done my research,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the therapy I know that's going to work for me. They said no, you're not suitable. CBT, basic CBT therapy
Mm.
will be helpful for you. So I had 6 sessions on that, which I just basically got bombarded with loads of information every week. And that was it.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. And then when I referred myself to the Oceans team, then I was told, no, sorry, you're too complex. We have to refer you to the community mental health team.
Gosh.
Then at that point I was like, I know what I want. I want EMDR. I'm not having anything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that they were like, oh, it's a year's waiting list. So I was like, fine, I don't care. I'll wait the year.
Yeah.
After a year, I found out they forgot to put me on the waiting list, and then I had to
Wow.
wait another year
No.
before I actually got it. It was only last year that I actually got the therapy, and I
Yeah.
was right. It was the therapy I needed.
Yeah.
Um, I could probably do with more, but that for me it worked for me because, like I said, I've worked in for support for such a long time. I then find it difficult to access support. And I'm very aware of the tick boxes that they're
Yeah.
doing.
Oh
I
yeah.
see when things are genuine, when they're not, and when it's just
Mm.
to improve outcomes for them, say, rather than for me. Uh,
Yeah.
well, I really struggled with any other type of therapy, whereas this one I would recommend to anybody. I think EMDR is amazing,
Mhm.
amazing. And again,
Good. Glad you got it in the end.
right.
But
Yeah.
that isn't that trauma in itself, Louisa. You know, those barriers to accessing care and that length of time it took you to eventually get what you said you needed from the start,
Mm.
that's traumatic in itself.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. This is why I always say to people they don't understand the layers of grief and trauma, because I lost my son. It'll be 6 years this year. I lost
Mm.
him, and that on its own is difficult enough.
Yeah.
That just nothing else added to it. But then
Yeah.
on top of that, I've had to fight for years to get the right treatment that I need, because it has
Mhm.
impacted me. Off the back of my EMDR therapy, I found out that I've actually got complex PTSD, and I've been living with that for a long time. And then losing my son has given me the active symptoms of PTSD
Right. Okay.
and anxiety on
Yeah.
top of that. But then on top of that, I've so I made a complaint. It took me a year, because I had another baby quite quickly after losing,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
had complications in that pregnancy. I almost lost him as well. I had to advocate for myself and do my own research
Yeah.
to save
Yeah.
that pregnancy. And then after I had him, after he was in hospital for 2.5, when he was 2.5 weeks with sepsis, um, then I decided, no, I'm making a complaint. This is not
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And we are going to be 5 years into that complaint this year, and it's still hasn't been resolved. It was 2 years with the trust, and it will be nearly 3 years with the ombudsman this year.
Wow.
And I've literally had to be a solicitor. I've had to be a medical expert. I've had to read research papers from BAPM and all sorts of things to be able
Mm.
to make my point, and to be thorough to the point that it's still, I don't believe, been competently investigated or objectively investigated, to now the process has caused me additional harm on top of
Mhm.
the harm I've already
Mm.
experienced that I was complaining about in the first
Yeah.
place.
You're having to jump through all of these hoops and break down all of these
Yeah.
walls that clearly adds to the trauma. And I think they make the complaint system
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah, 100%. And they've done that with me. They've literally done that. They've taken the maximum length of time that they can to respond to me in every single aspect. And they've never fully responded to all of it. It's been bits and parts. I've had to go back, hence why it's taken so long. And
Yeah.
they've gone out of their way to make it as difficult as possible. That's how it feels anyway. And I'm very aware I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. But because they're doing that, we don't get a true picture of what is the
Yeah.
reality of what's actually going on, because
Yeah.
people will give up. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of knowledge. I've had to teach myself so much stuff to be able to make a complaint, you know.
When you breathe in as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, on top of that. And then
So many
I've
people
still
give
got
up.
living children as well that I have to look after as
Yeah.
well, and run a household, be a mum,
Mhm.
and work jobs in between that. And that's in the end why I've given up working for other people, and I created
Mhm.
Zion's Lighthouse, because I'm so passionate about change, because I've seen what I've personally had to go through, and
Yeah.
I've interviewed multiple people who've got similar stories. Like,
Mhm.
this is not okay. This
Mhm.
is why I respect you so much and what you do as well, because it impacts that. Because even I say what you're doing is the Zion part for me, but if we can get that right, the rest
Mhm.
of it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wouldn't have had to try and access counseling. I wouldn't have had to be, making these complaints and, doing this research and becoming an expert on this and this and this to be able to make change, because the change is already there.
Yeah.
They're already trying, and there is times when we know that there's going to be poor outcomes. No matter what somebody does, they
Mhm.
can't always change the outcomes, but we can
Mhm.
change the journey and how people are treated along that journey, and we can make it better or worse for
Definitely.
them.
Yeah.
And the work that you're doing is hopefully, when, and I say when, because it will be a when everybody starts to listen and take stuff on board, because I am
Mhm.
confident we're gonna keep going, we're gonna
Yeah.
make changes. It's just a
Yeah.
long road. But
Mhm.
it will improve outcomes, and at the very least, will improve the support and the experience people have. Uh,
Yeah.
and we reinvest back into society as people, you know. If we
Mhm.
know that we're held in a certain space, we want to go back and we want to help that space,
Yeah, definitely.
fighting it against it or just being tired and
Mm.
it's exhausting. It is exhausting.
It is exhausting. And we said, didn't we, at the last baby loss AP, is it APPG?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, I think it was you that mentioned actually how it's the black and brown people that step up after a loss and to strive for change, because of the disparities, I mean, and come up have their own organizations, their own charities and things, which is absolutely fantastic and brilliant, and in the name of their children who they've sadly lost. But that why is it always the people of color that need to do that?
yeah,
Why is it always us?
yeah,
Especially when you've had a loss and you having to take that on yourself to do it, should be being done for you by
yeah.
the institutions.
Yeah, and you should want that. My hope is that they one day they want to. It's not about, you know, putting blame on people and showing where people are where, well, yeah, it is to a degree. We do have to show where people are at fault to a degree to be able to rectify that. But it doesn't have to be about it. It doesn't. I don't think people start off it being like that. They just
No.
want better outcomes. But because of the
Mhm.
way it's treated, it then becomes a battle. Like, you know,
Yeah.
who's right, who's wrong, and or it's about saving face or whatever. But it's not. It's
Yeah.
about saving lives. That's what it's about,
Yeah.
saving lives. And
Exactly.
you know, the ethos of this country, the way they want us to believe, it shouldn't be a problem. It should
Mhm.
they shouldn't be difficult conversations. We should be able to
Yeah.
have these conversations and people don't feel uncomfortable. And but they do. I remember that at the same one when, you know, like you say, you feel like you have to justify why you're about to have this conversation, and that's a common theme for a lot of us, that because we feel so uncomfortable before we
Mm.
then start talking, we have to almost have an argument as to say,
Yeah. You're going
why
to be saying this to
are
me.
we having this? Yeah, why are we having this
Yeah.
conversation? But actually, no, I've got to a point now where I'm not unapologetic. Like these is the reality, and I'm sorry if it makes you feel uncomfortable, because guess what?
Mhm.
We felt uncomfortable for centuries.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, get used to feeling
Exactly.
uncomfortable, because that's how
Mhm.
we'll make change.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have to apologize before we state the facts, because
Yeah.
actually it should be these institutions apologizing to us.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And I'm getting better at that.
Yeah,
I'm
I would
getting
say.
better at that.
Yeah, and like I said, and I want to end on this as well. Like
Mm.
the way you describe things is so accessible to anybody that's listening, to the politicians, to the people working within the NHS, to the parents, to all of us. And you break it down in a way that I personally can't see why anybody would get defensive over it. Because when you're looking at resource tools, for example, the jaundice resource tool, for
Mm.
example, and you're
Mhm.
highlighting what it's teaching people and what it's not teaching people, that's just
Mhm.
facts. It's not
Mhm.
opinions, it's
Yeah.
facts. Nobody
Yeah.
needs to get defensive or upset over that. We can see that it's outdated, it doesn't work. So let's improve it. Just
Mhm.
like, you know, Apple does with their computers and their iPhones. They update every year.
Yeah.
Why don't we? You know,
Yeah.
you update on your services. You
Exactly.
doesn't.
And everything I present is backed up with evidence. It's all fact. People feel uncomfortable. It's something that's going on within them, isn't it? And maybe they're just not at the start of their anti-racist journey yet. Let's put it that way. Maybe this is the year where a spark's kind of lit inside them. Maybe it just isn't the right. I think it does have to be the right timing for people.
Hmm.
But that's the issue, because with all the different frameworks and things within the NHS, they might not get the training next year. It might be on to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
then you're not given that opportunity to kind of reignite something, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So,
And it should be a priority, because, like we said earlier, if we focus on the most vulnerable, then we're looking after everybody.
yeah,
So it should be a priority, and the fact that it isn't always a priority, that speaks volumes on its
yeah,
own. But like I say,
exactly.
the work that you're doing, you're getting people right from the beginning, which I think is so
Mm,
important, in
yeah,
when they're open to learning as
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
So before they actually go into the industry, say, and
Mhm.
get bogged down with other people's thoughts and opinions.
Yeah. And then it's a vicious cycle then.
Yeah, yeah. So you're
Yeah.
getting them early, and what is beautiful is that the fact that they're getting you in because they want you in, and that there's a market for it. That is great.
Yeah.
I love to hear that there's a market for it. People want to, so they're going
Yeah.
out of their way to get you in. We just need to now have that in part of the syllabus, so it's something that's mandatory that they have to
Yeah.
learn along the way. But then
Yeah.
also then going in helping individuals, but also the work that you're doing within the NHS as
Mhm.
well. It is
Mhm.
so important, and like I say, I applaud you and I respect you, and I'm thankful for you because I know it's not an easy task all the time, but it's needed. And I think, like I said, you're very articulate in the way that you speak, that you people listen and they understand. You do it in a
Oh,
way that people can understand, and
yeah.
rather than, like I said, get their backs up, which
Mhm.
obviously there's gonna be people that do that, but
Mhm.
we can't.
Yeah.
You
Can't
can't.
please everyone,
Yeah,
can
yeah,
we?
no, no. But it is really good, and it is educational. So if people want to access your consultancy company, or get you into their universities, or even, I mean, I don't know how the NHS works, if they're allowed to, other trusts are allowed to pinch you or pinch some of your ideas or anything like that. Like how do they do that?
So they can just get in touch with me. If it's a completely different NHS trust, I can provide consultancy. And it's kind of like so in the trust that I'm at now, I'm ED&I midwife, so that's the everyday stuff. But I can kind of offer that, what that looks like in a nutshell, to other trusts to try and um, tell them how I would do things at their trust with an EDI lens. It might just be that they want me to have a look over their newly written anti-racism policy and go through it for comment. It might be just be that, or it might be that they want me to come in and do some education if they've not got an EDI midwife. So yeah, yeah,
So what's
it's
your
more, it's more at the moment antenatal education, universities, and the odd NHS trust. It's hard to crack that.
Hmm.
It's all funding, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, but it would be nice if they get to a point that it's as an employee of the NHS, other organisations, we work together. You share what works in
Good,
one
yeah,
area and what works in another area. It would be good
yeah,
if they could actually work it so they don't have to employ you as a consultant, that
hmm,
you're collaborating together
yeah,
and improving trust together. Like, I think that's
yeah,
because there are maternity services out there that do a good job, and like, I'm not
yeah,
stating that everyone is bad, and there are
hmm,
people and there are places that are getting it right, and they are doing their best,
hmm,
and
hmm.
it's about learning from that. And like, I'm very it's very important that we talk about what's good as well as what was bad.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you know we're working in a system which often means our hands are tied for certain things as midwives as well. Um, so until we make a systemic change, I don't think we're going to see massive changes. It has to be kind of system level,
Yeah.
and that's what trusts often need consultancy on
Mm.
because it's been the same way for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody wants to get hold of you, get in contact with you, how can they do that?
So they can email me on it's just info at nyabirthcollective.com.
Okay. And you've got, oh, go on.
So Nya Birth Collective on Instagram, NYA Birth Collective, and then also midwife Keelie, Keelie. Can always DM me about anything on Instagram.
Okay. Well, and I will put the links to that as well when I release this podcast as well. So anybody that would like to reach out to you, they'll have all that
Yeah.
information for you.
Brill, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on today, and thank you for all the work that you're doing and continue to do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.